Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder how you know if someone is really hurting even if they can't show you a cut or a bruise? That is a huge question, and today we're diving into a fascinating study that explores just that. This paper asks a big question: why is pain so hard for us to understand in others? Even though it is such a personal experience for each of us. We all go through pain, but nobody else can truly feel what you are feeling. Yet, we constantly have to make judgments about other people's pain. Think about it: doctors deciding if you need treatment, parents figuring out if a kid is faking an illness, or even juries deciding how much someone should be compensated for suffering. How do we as everyday people figure out if someone's pain is real and how bad it is when we can't directly experience it ourselves? The researchers believe that we all have what they call an intuitive theory of pain. It is like a built-in understanding, a mental model that helps us guess what other people are experiencing. They think this is the same kind of mental tool we use to understand other hidden things, like what someone else is thinking or intending. They wanted to see if they could build a formal model, like a clear set of rules, to describe how this intuitive theory works. They looked at two main ideas about pain. One is that pain comes from actual damage to the body, something we can see evidence of. The other is that pain is purely a subjective experience, something only the person feeling it knows about, and we can only know it if they tell us. They tested this by creating short stories scenarios. These stories were about people experiencing different kinds of pain. Some stories focused on what happened to the body, like an injury or a physical problem, and some included physical evidence or lack thereof. They wanted to see if people could predict how much pain someone would be in just by looking at this physical information, even without the person saying anything about their pain. This is like trying to figure out how sick someone is just by looking at their symptoms. In their first experiment, they gave people stories that described an event that happened to someone and any physical evidence of a problem in that person's body. Crucially, there was no mention of the person actually reporting pain. They asked people two things first: how much pain did they expect this person to be in on a scale from 0 to 100? And second, how much of a special painkiller would they prescribe? They wanted to see if people could predict pain from physical causes alone. And guess what? They found that people could indeed make pretty good predictions about how much pain someone would experience based on the physical events and evidence provided. This showed that we don't just rely on what someone tells us about their pain. We also use information about what happened to their body and what physical signs there are. This suggests that our intuitive theory of pain has a strong body-centric component, meaning we associate pain with physical problems. But what happens when we do get a pain report? This is where the next experiment comes in. Experiment 2 explored how people put together different pieces of information. They gave participants stories that included the inciting event, the physical evidence, and what the person themselves said about their pain. Then they asked participants how much painkiller they would prescribe. The idea here is to see how people weigh different sources of information. Do they trust the pain report completely, or do they still consider the physical evidence? The researchers set up 3 models to explain people's decisions. One was the physicalist model, which thinks only physical stuff matters. Another was the experientialist model, which believes only the person's report matters, thinking pain is whatever the person says it is. And then there was the integrated model, which they thought would be the most accurate, combining both physical information and the pain report. And the integrated model turned out to be the winner. It did a much better job of predicting what people would do. This means that people don't just blindly trust the pain report, nor do they completely ignore it. They actively combine the physical evidence and what the person says to come up with a judgment about the likely pain and how to treat it. They take physical evidence into account when deciding on a painkiller dosage, and it's not just about what the person reports. Now, here is where it gets really interesting. Experiment 3 tackled the question of suspicion. What happens when a pain report seems a little too much given the physical evidence? Do we start to wonder if there is another reason someone is claiming to be in pain? They introduced the idea of ulterior motives, like someone wanting time off work or attention. They created a version of their model that included this ulterior motive factor. The idea is that if a pain report is high but the physical evidence is low, their model predicts that people will suspect an ulterior motive. And when they suspect a motive, they'll explain away the pain report, meaning they'll discount it. This will then lead to them prescribing less pain medication. And the results were striking. The integrated model, the one that combined physical and reported pain, was surprisingly good at predicting when people suspected ulterior motives. When people suspected a motive, they indeed prescribed less painkiller. This explaining away effect was captured well by their model. It shows that our intuitive theory of pain isn't just about diagnosing pain, but also about figuring out why someone might be reporting pain. If the physical evidence doesn't match the reported pain, we get suspicious. So, what does all of this mean? The researchers conclude that we don't have a purely physical or purely mental theory of pain. Instead, we have an integrated theory. We use causal reasoning, like a detective, to piece together clues. Physical events can lead to bodily problems, which leave physical evidence and cause pain experience. This pain experience then leads to a pain report. If there is a mismatch between the reported pain and the physical evidence, we might infer an ulterior motive. What is really neat is that this integrated theory seems to work for all sorts of pain, from headaches to finger burns. The same basic model could predict people's judgments across different kinds of pain and across different experimental tasks. This shows that our intuitive theory of pain is quite robust and flexible. One of the key findings is that even though modern medicine often says self-report is the gold standard for pain, people in the real world don't just take pain reports at face value. They actively weigh it against physical evidence, which is a more body-centric approach. The study also highlighted that our intuition about pain is not just about individual sensations, but also about inferring potential ulterior motives when reports don't align with physical evidence. When pain reports lack corroborating physical evidence, people tend to be suspicious. Ultimately, this research tells us that our understanding of pain in others is a lot like our understanding of other hidden states like beliefs or desires. It is a process of causal inference. We build a mental model that takes into account both physical information and what people tell us, and we use that model to make judgments. It's a sophisticated system that helps us navigate the social world, even when dealing with something as private and subjective as pain. Now, for my take on this study is fantastic because it moves beyond just describing how people think about pain to actually building a computational model, a scientific quantitative description of that thinking. It highlights the beautiful blend of empirical work and formal modeling that helps us understand intuition. The fact that their integrated model consistently outperforms simpler models, or even a powerful AI language model like Llama 3.1, suggests that there is something special about this structured causal way of thinking about pain. It gives us a real insight into the storytelling we do in our minds when we try to understand another's suffering. Of course, no study is perfect. One limitation they noted is that for some types of pain, like male genital and pelvic pain, their model's fit wasn't as strong. This might be because the way they collected their story examples for those categories had less variation in the pain reports. Also, while their model is great, it is still a simplification of a very complex human experience. They also found that people tended to weigh physical evidence more heavily than the initial event that caused the problem. This suggests we're more interested in the current state of the body than the initial cause. The implications here are huge for doctors. It means understanding that patients' self-reports, while important, are always going to be filtered through our intuitive body-mind theories of pain. This could inform how medical professionals communicate and how they might address skepticism when physical evidence is scarce, for all of us. It sheds light on why we sometimes doubt pain reports and that it is often rooted in a rational causal inference process, rather than just being purely judgmental. Future research could explore how these intuitive theories change with medical training or how they interact with cultural factors. It is a step towards demystifying something incredibly fundamental to the human experience. If you found this dive into the science of pain as fascinating as I did, please hit that like button. Leave a comment with your thoughts on how you judge pain in others. And don't forget to subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab for more explorations into the human mind. Thanks for watching.